program in grades 6 through 8 at the same time. And this was all initiated last year. So we're also trying to figure out how we can support that project moving forward. So there's lots of desire for additional funds to purchase these science materials. But I'm going to just put it on the table now that I'm concerned about the sustainability of the No Atom program in this district moving forward. So I need more information about that.
I'm assuming that other school districts have this program.
That's something that I've asked Patrick to gather for me.
Okay, because I'd like to know how because $100,000 a year it's money that we're not going to have.
Right, exactly. It's very concerning to me, and I met with Patrick again today to see if there's any change in the cost associated with this program to not only fully implement it, but to sustain it from one year to the next. And he had the same quote from the person who represents the No Atom company.
If at some point in the future, I think we need to be updated on where the science program, because obviously a lot of people are concerned about it and have interest in this program. Just reading, not specifically related, but just reading last week in the Globe about engineering students at schools like Wentworth and MIT, not only getting job offers, but turning job offers down left and right because there are so few kids going into the areas of these kinds of science areas. And I just think it's something we really need to get a handle on, and obviously you will.
Absolutely.
Moving forward.
We're moving forward with the science curriculum specialists who are taking a close look at
Right.
this as well.
Okay. So
I'm just concerned about the funding.
So if down the road, not too far down the road, you can just bring us up to speed on
Will do.
what kind of
When I have
decisions
more
are made then.
information.
Okay. And then, in terms of professional development, I was looking in the current update for the budget this year, and I see there are funds left over in that budget. Will those be spent? And the fact that we do have a surplus there, does that mean that this cut won't be as serious or significant?
This cut represents a cut to the district professional development line. There are small pockets of money in each of the school lines for professional development, and that money is allocated based on how the principals see the money should be allocated regarding initiatives in their buildings. So as far as, I'd have to take a closer look at what has not been expended yet, but it's my understanding that it will all be expended by the end of this school year.
Because I guess my concern there is what specific, maybe you don't know what specific things, but what kinds of things won't we be able to do by cutting that money?
I can tell you that the district level money, and again, we had to make an initial reduction, if I'm not mistaken. No, we didn't. We didn't have that in the initial 287,000. That money has been used for teachers to attend conferences and workshops based on their selection and their ideas, as well as sending teachers to workshops and conferences that sustain initiatives that have already been implemented in the district. So there's a little bit of self-selection as well as district workshops.
See, and to me that's problematic because the self-selected workshops are usually the ones that the teachers are most interested in and are going to help them the most. And then the other ones where we've already initiated programs are obviously things we want the teachers to be up to speed on the latest and greatest in those programs. So if there's any way of shifting any money around,
We will continue to work on that.
but we'll still have our internal workshops, the half days, and the
That's correct. The
Professional
professional
development days.
collaboration that needs to take place between teachers and between schools and between grade levels will still continue. There's still a lot of work to be done within district.
That's all I have. Anybody else? I think as Mr. Bauer said, it's somewhat of a slip sliding backwards. It looks like we're asking for a lot of money this year, a 5.2% increase, but a big part of that is because we're losing a lot of money from the federal government that the federal government handed over the last few years that hasn't been replenished.
Correct.
And I want to raise again, and I know Mr. Bowers is working on this, we just have an imbalance in this town. We're in the bottom 25% of per pupil expenditures, yet the Boston Globe had a chart this week. We're 67th from the top in terms of how much we spend per resident for kids in our schools. So what does that say? We have more school-age kids per household than other communities, and the state won't recognize that.
There's no credit for that.
And it's just so frustrating.
And it shouldn't be hard to figure out. If you
It
have
should
more
be, it's
kids,
not, if you're,
you know, with the tax base.
we're
being,
spending
you know,
well above the state average per resident to educate our kids,
we're in the
and
bottom
we're well
25%.
below the state average in how much we spend per student.
Simple
What does that tell you?
Simple
But
arithmetic.
it doesn't fit their formula.
It doesn't fit their formula.
And they won't, I beat them on the side of the wall, you know, with that, trying to get it across that this is an issue. I brought it up with the MASC's field directors. And initially they said, oh, no, you're not understanding it. Well, then they began to understand it. So they understand it. And, you know, and they gave me the name of the guy at DESE, and I beat on him, and I was on the phone with him for over an hour. And he, you know, refuses to budge on it. I think it's because it probably means work.
Means reform.
It does mean reform.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's so frustrating, because I think the town, we take 67% of the total revenues generated by the town for the school district. And the town, you know, if you read the paper and the patch last week, the police chief wants to replace fill two openings that have been there for a couple of years. And the town said, selectmen said no. And there's issues with, you know, fire staffing, and the DPW is at the same level, I think, since probably the last 15, 20 years. So it's not that the town isn't giving us the resources that we need. It's really, as Karen said, it needs to be some reform at the state level. I do have one other question before we get to a vote here. Carl, what if the additional circuit breaker doesn't come to fruition and we have to find $144,000? It's likely going to have to be personnel, correct? There's really no
Oh, that's the million-dollar question, and it's certainly a question that.
$144,000 question. Yeah. Thank God it's not $1 million question.
I think that what the administration would do is begin by looking at the school committee goals to provide us guidance as to what our priorities are. You get to a point where reducing expenditures anymore, these so-called discretionary expenditures, might have impact that parallels reducing personnel. But can we do it without reducing personnel? I think the answer is yes. But the next question is, you have to measure that against what you'd be needing to cut.
Right, exactly. I mean, we don't want to cut the school budgets back to, the expense budgets back to beyond bare bones, where we start suffering because we don't have supplies that we need to run the schools, so.
Well, I think we're gonna vote on a number now. That's our number. It's as close to level services as we can get, and I think we stay with that number until we're told
Before we vote,
otherwise.
did you want to
I do want to make a comment, and again, this is not adversarial in nature, but I read in the transcript, I think it was at the meeting from 2
budget
weeks
hearing,
ago,
which
the
you were
budget hearing
ill.
meeting, that two of the selectmen, Mr. Delaney and Mr. Prisco, again raised the issue about opening the teacher's contract, and I think they actually requested publicly for them to do so. And I just want to clarify something, and that is that the teacher's contract is in no way, shape, or form responsible for any budget deficit that we may be looking at either now or in the future during the life of this contract. I was involved, along with Mr. Webster, in negotiating that contract. And I certainly don't want the public to perceive, or the town to perceive, that the teachers, again, are in any way responsible for, like I said, the deficit. But they stepped up to the plate almost 3 years ago. They recognized the dire economic circumstances that we were in at that point in time. They were able to also project out into the future 3 or 4 years as to what the economy was going to be like and what the budget was going to be like. And they stepped up in a big way, in my opinion. They deserve a world of credit for it, because they took a pay cut in the first year of that contract. And that's a fact. And I defy anybody to tell me about any other municipal union in this town that's taken a pay cut. I've been around for a long time, and I don't recall any. So they took a pay cut the first year. They took minimal raises in the second and third year, and they actually went out 4 years in their contract. It turned into being a 4-year agreement. So again, I just want to give them credit, because for them to do that, and to do it 3 years ago in anticipation of where we were going to be today, and they were right and we were right. We didn't think things were going to be getting any better very soon, and they haven't. But I just don't want people to be misled. I can't for the life of me understand why, with a little bit more than a year to go on their contract, members of the Board of Selectmen would be asking them to reopen the contract and to talk about what, I'm not sure. But I certainly have no intention, I'm not speaking for anybody else on this committee, I'm speaking for myself, but I certainly have no intention of asking them to do that. And so I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah, and I agree with Mr. Venezia. They have 1 year left on their deal. You know, teachers who were on steps did take a pay cut that first year, and that other teachers who are at the top step took 0.
But overall, the contract overall
Right,
for the
that was
first
right.
year was a
It was a
reduction.
reduction.
Right, I think what
reduction.
we're seeing is that there are people in town who are certainly running for election, and we're seeing some campaigning. I also think there's a general misunderstanding about what drives costs and where the responsibility lies, and I think that that is always going to be a challenge to make sure that we communicate as a committee and as elected officials in this town where costs come from. And in our presentation at our forum, the cost drivers were partially driven by personnel, and teachers do eat a huge part of our budget. However, that's not the entire story, which is what you allude to, and it has nothing to do with the teachers in the contract that they currently have. They did take a bullet, to be frank, and they saw what was
Well, they did the
coming.
right thing.
Right.
They
They
did
did the
exactly
right
the
thing.
right thing, and I
Yeah.
think, and we have acknowledged that in
Yeah,
many
we have.
fronts. And I agree with you, Jerry. I don't support reopening that contract. To me, that's insane.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense. There are other areas in town that we as school committee members may wish to comment on privately, but our role is around the staff that we work with and that we support through our budget. And I think that's where we can comment.
Well, I have a conflict of interest in talking about teachers' contract, but I can make a statement about the cost of education in this town, and that is that we are in the bottom 25% of per student costs in the Commonwealth. And that bottom 25% includes many districts that don't provide high school. And so their costs are particularly lower because they don't provide high school. The lower grades don't cost as much as high school costs. So we're already a highly efficient organization, and that's a fact. That's the bottom line is that we're providing an education here for a bargain basement price.
And I think-
And whatever goes into making that up that is in the mix somewhere. And at the same time, as we've made statements in the past, we made it, I think in the budget meeting, budget hearing a couple of weeks back, that we're in the top 12, 14% in math and science, and in the top 20, I think 24, 25th or something like that percent in English language arts. Those are good numbers. When we're in the top part in the performance and in the bottom part in cost, that's a deal. And if we could just work that kind of deal in every part of our lives, we'd be in pretty good shape.
And I think it's also fair to say our contracts are no different than contracts in just about every other district in this state. Now, does that make them right or good? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that
They're competitive.
they're competitive, but the way the contracts are built, they have all teachers' contracts and all districts have steps built in. And until there's a structural change, and we could take that on individually, I think we'd have a miserable time. But until there's a structural change in how teachers are compensated in the state, maybe even in the country, and you saw the education commissioner's announcement this past week about evaluations, which is going to be interesting to see how that plays out. But I just think that's a step in the direction of they're gonna start looking at teachers' contracts and on a statewide basis, and then things may change. But at this point, we work within the structure that we have, and it's difficult.
And I think also, our team has really worked very hard to get to this point. We really do so much with almost nothing. And I think sometimes succeeding in that kind of environment also makes it difficult for us. I mean, if we were scratching the bottom and we had to participate in Race to the Top, I think things might be slightly different. But we're a district where achievement is pretty high.